October 23, 2025. Salinas Valley State Prison, Soledad, California. 6 a.m. The facility wakes up like it does every morning. Guards change shifts. Cell doors unlock. Inmates move through their routines. Eat in, walk in, waiting in American history. A man who had survived decades behind bars. A man who thought he understood the rules of this place. He had no idea what was coming. Improvised weapons appear. The attack is immediate. It is focused. It does not stop. Guards issue commands, verbal orders to halt. But by the time boots hit the yard concrete, the damage is done. At 10:04 a.m., Todd Morgan is pronounced dead. 12 minutes. From the first strike to the last breath. 12 minutes. 3 men did this. In broad daylight. In front of cameras. In front of guards. Inside a meth. And today, we're going inside. Before we get into today's story, we want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this right now? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. We have viewers tuning in from every corner of the globe, and every time we ask, the response never fails to amaze us. To understand what happens inside Salinas Valley State Prison, you first have to understand what it is. It sits on 300 acres of land in Soledad, California, Monterey County, Pacific Central Coast. Just a few miles from some of the most beautiful coastline in the entire country. From the outside, you could almost miss it. Inside is a different world entirely. Salinas Valley State Prison houses over 2,400 men, Level 3 and Level 4 inmates. The two highest security classifications in the California prison system. These are not men serving short sentences for minor offenses. These are men convicted of murder, attempted murder, violent felonies. Many of them carrying life sentences, some of them carrying multiple life sentences. The facility is divided into 5 yards, and on those yards, at any given time, walk representatives of some of the most organized and dangerous criminal groups in the United States. The Nuestra Familia, the Norteños, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Nazi lowriders, the Mongols Motorcycle Club, the Hessians. These are not random collections of violent men. These are structured organizations, with rules, with hierarchies, with codes of conduct, and with consequences for breaking them. Consequences that are carried out not in courtrooms, but on prison yards, in housing units, in cells, with whatever weapon a man can make from whatever he can find. And the numbers tell you everything you need to know about what that looks like in practice. In less than 1 year, Salinas Valley State Prison opened 7 separate homicide investigations. 7. Not assaults, not stabbings where the victim survived. 7 deaths. 7 men who walked into that facility alive and did not walk out. Now, some people hear that and assume it means the prison has failed, that the system has lost control. But here is the harder truth. For the men we are about to introduce you to, Salinas Valley State Prison did not break them. It did not slow them down. It did not rehabilitate them, or redirect them, or change who they are. For some of them, these walls simply became the new location, where they continued doing what they had always done. These walls were built to contain dangerous men. For 5 of those men, it did not work. His name is Timothy McGhee. And before we tell you what he did, we need to tell you where he came from. Atwater Village, Los Angeles, California. A lower middle-class neighborhood sitting just north of downtown, wedged between the Los Angeles River and the city of Glendale. It is the kind of neighborhood where people work hard, keep their heads down, and try to build something. It is also Toonerville territory. The Toonerville gang had claimed Atwater Village for decades, and Timothy McGhee did not just grow up near it, he grew up inside it. His father was a white American of Scottish descent. His mother, Mexican American. By the time he was a young man, he was not just a member of Toonerville, he was running it. And when Timothy McGhee ran something, people died. Between 1997 and 2001, law enforcement would link McGee to at least 9 murders. 9. But it was not just the number that disturbed investigators. It was the pattern. McGee used violence the way a businessman uses leverage. He killed to control. He killed to silence. He killed to send messages that words could not deliver. And according to the detectives who spent years hunting him, he did something that most violent criminals do not do. He enjoyed it. A deputy district attorney who prosecuted McGee said this in open court. "The one quality I have seen in him that I have not seen before is a quality more typical of a serial killer. He seemed to enjoy killing." A former LAPD detective who investigated him was more direct. He called McGee, and these are his words, basically a monster. And the evidence backed it up. In the year 2000, a 17-year-old named Ryan Gonzalez was shot and killed in Toonerville territory. The following year, McGee allegedly walked into a home in Atwater Village and killed 3 people, a woman, her mother, and another man. The reason? He suspected the woman had spoken to police about drug activity in the neighborhood. She had talked, so she died, and so did everyone with her, because they had witnessed it. One of his victims, Ronnie Martin, 25 years old, was shot 28 times, 28, and when 2 LAPD officers got close to catching members of his crew during a robbery, McGee is believed to have been among those who opened fire on them in what investigators called a deliberate ambush. Both officers survived. Both were awarded the LAPD Medal of Valor for their actions that day. McGee disappeared in 2001. He was placed on the United States Marshal's Most Wanted list. For 2 years, he was gone. While investigators followed leads and witnesses stayed silent out of fear, Timothy McGhee moved freely. He was captured in Arizona in 2003. 4.5 years later, in September 2007, his trial began. The charges were staggering. 3 counts of murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, including the attempted murders of 2 police officers. On October 26, 2007, the jury convicted him. 2 years after that, in 2009, Superior Court Judge Robert Perry sentenced him to death. At sentencing, the judge looked at McGee and said he had treated the act of murder as some kind of perverse sport, as if he was hunting human game. The death sentence was handed down. McGee was sent to death row at San Quentin State Prison. Most people assumed that was the end of Timothy McGhee. It was not. In 2012, while sitting on death row, McGee was returning from a shower when he produced a shank and slashed 2 corrections officers. Not on the streets, not before his arrest, after his conviction, after his death sentence, inside one of the most secure facilities in California. In 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom placed a moratorium on executions in the state. McGee was removed from death row and transferred to the general population at Salinas Valley State Prison. A man convicted of multiple murders, a man sentenced to death, now walking the same yards as the general population. And then, in April 2025, the California Supreme Court overturned his murder convictions entirely. A juror, the court ruled, had been improperly dismissed during deliberations. McGee would be entitled to a new trial, decades after the bodies were buried, decades after the families buried their dead and tried to rebuild their lives. The legal process would begin again. As of today, Timothy McGhee remains incarcerated. The outcome of his case, still unresolved. A former detective once said that in all his years on the force, he had never encountered anyone quite like McGee, that the closest comparison he could make was to Charles Manson. Think about that for a moment, and then consider this. The next man on this list did not operate with the chaos of a street gang leader. He operated with something far more calculated, far more structured. He ran violence like a corporation, and he did it from inside a jail cell. His name is Johnny Magdaleno. On the streets of Salinas, California, they called him Soldier Boy. The name fit, because what Johnny Magdaleno did inside the Monterey County Jail between 2012 and 2014 was not the work of a street thug acting on impulse. It was not rage, it was not desperation, it was organized. It was deliberate. And it was carried out with the kind of cold discipline that most people associate with the military, not a jail cell. To understand Johnny Magdaleno, you first have to understand the organization he served. Nuestra Familia, Spanish for our family. It is one of the most structured and dangerous prison gangs in the United States. Founded in California in 1965, it operates like a military unit, with generals, captains, soldiers, and written rules. Its foot soldiers on the streets are known as the Norteños. Its generals issue orders from inside prison walls, and those orders are followed. Johnny Magdaleno was a high-ranking member of the East Las Casitas Norteños, a street gang whose members pledge full loyalty to Nuestra Familia. Inside the Monterey County Jail, he rose to lead a group called La Casa. In that role, he had one primary function: discipline. Inside Nuestra Familia, when a member breaks the rules, serious rules, there is a consequence. They call it a removal. A removal is not a fight. It is not a beating. It is a coordinated weapon-based assault, designed to do one thing: remove a person from both the housing unit and the gang itself, permanently, if necessary. The process is precise. One or more hitters approach the target and stab them, repeatedly. Immediately after, a group of bombers move in and beat the victim with their fists and feet. The purpose of the bombers is twofold. First, to inflict maximum damage. Second, to give the hitters time to dispose of the weapons before guards arrive. This is not improvised street violence. This is a system, a protocol, with roles, timing, and execution. And Johnny Magdaleno was not just approving these removals from a distance. He was doing them himself. December 2, 2012, Monterey County Jail. A victim, whose name has been withheld in court records, is approached by Magdaleno. There is no warning. Magdaleno stabs him. In the chest. In the back. Over 20 times. When it is done, two bombers move in, punching, kicking, while Magdaleno separates himself from the weapon. By the time guards reach the scene, the shank is gone, and Magdaleno has stepped back into the chaos. February 25, 2013. This time, Magdaleno is more patient, more deliberate. He gives the target marijuana first. Let him relax. Let his guard come down. Let him feel safe. With a shank he had made from a sharpened electrical outlet plate, 3 bombers follow immediately. April 29, 2013. Another removal. This time the victim is told by multiple people that he is safe, that nothing will happen to him. He is assured, reassured, and walked back into his housing pod. He is stabbed in the head several times the moment he arrives. November 13, 2013. April 14, 2014. The removals continue. Between December 2012 and April 2014, Johnny Magdaleno orchestrated or directly participated in 7 violent assaults against fellow inmates, all of them carried out as enforcement of Nuestra Familia's rules. In September 2018, a federal grand jury indicted Magdaleno on racketeering conspiracy charges, along with over a dozen other gang members connected to the same enterprise. On February 13, 2020, Johnny Magdaleno pleaded guilty. In November of that same year, he was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. At sentencing, the district court noted that Magdaleno had been the authority in charge inside the Monterey County Jail, that he had directly participated in multiple removals, that he had admitted under oath to all of it. The court also imposed a special condition of his supervised release, banning him from any association with members of the Norteños or Nuestra Familia for the rest of his life. Magdaleno appealed that condition all the way to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He lost. Johnny Magdaleno will be in his 60s when he is eligible for release, if he is ever released at all. But here's what stays with you about his case. It was not the violence itself, as horrifying as it was. The fact that men sitting inside a jail cell, already in custody, already convicted, had built a system so organized and so embedded that stabbings were being approved like memos, carried out like assignments, and covered up like clockwork. The next man on this list operated in a completely different world, not a prison gang, but a motorcycle club, a different brotherhood, a different code. But when it came to the capacity for violence, the distance between them was not as far as you might think. Not every dangerous man inside Salinas Valley State Prison came through a street gang or a prison organization. Some came through a different kind of brotherhood entirely. The outlaw motorcycle club world operates on its own code, its own hierarchy, its own definition of loyalty, and its own definition of what happens when that loyalty is violated. And, while the patches and the motorcycles may look different from the gang colors of the Norteños or the Toonerville crew, the capacity for violence is the same. Ray Waldron and Robert Englund arrived at Salinas Valley through different roads, different crimes, different affiliations, different decades. But inside these walls, they ended up on the same yard. And on October 23, 2025, the same morning we described at the very beginning of this video, they moved in the same direction, toward the same target, with the same purpose. You already know how that morning ended. Now let us tell you who these men are. Ray Waldron is 51 years old. Before he ever set foot inside a California state prison, he was a member of the Mongols Motorcycle Club, one of the most notorious and violent outlaw biker gangs in the United States. A gang with a long and documented history of armed confrontations, drug trafficking, and murder. A gang whose rivalry with the Hells Angels has left bodies on both sides for decades. In 2003, that rivalry came to a head outside a bar in El Cajon, California, a city just east of San Diego. A man associated with the Hells Angels was present. Words were exchanged, or perhaps none were. What happened next was not complicated. Ray Waldron shot him. The man died. When San Diego County prosecutors finished building their case against him, the charges were extensive. First-degree murder, first-degree attempted murder, assault with a firearm, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, all of it carrying gang enhancements under California law. All of it stacked on top of prior felony convictions that made him a third striker. On February 1, 2005, Ray Waldron was received into the California Department of Corrections. He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. He brought everything he was into that facility with him. Robert Englund. Robert Englund is 61 years old. He has been inside the California prison system since 1993. Think about that timeline for a moment. While most people were living through the 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s, building careers, raising families, watching the world change, Robert Englund was inside. For over 30 years, California's prison system has been his world. Englund was associated with the Hessians Motorcycle Club, another outlaw biker organization with deep roots in California's criminal underworld. In 1993, a murder conviction in San Bernardino County ended his life on the outside, but it did not end his capacity for violence. Inside Salinas Valley State Prison, Englund built a reputation. In 2009, he was convicted of assaulting another inmate, a charge that added to his sentence and his record. 5 years later, in 2014, a Salinas-based newspaper identified him as a suspect in a knife attack carried out by 4 inmates that left one prisoner dead and another seriously injured. 30 years inside, 2 documented incidents of prison violence, a face tattooed with the SS insignia, the symbol of Adolf Hitler's personal paramilitary force, visible to every guard, every inmate, and every camera in the facility. Robert Englund has never hidden what he is. Now you know who they are. Now we can tell you the full story of that Tuesday morning. The target was Todd Morgan, known as Fox, 57 years old, a reputed leader of the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist prison gang with roots going back decades inside America's federal and state prison systems. Morgan was not a passive figure. He had been at Salinas Valley for years and had used that time to build something. Federal investigators had uncovered a large-scale drug operation he was running from inside the prison, coordinating multi-pound methamphetamine and heroin deals, smuggling drugs through the prison walls using contraband cell phones. In one instance, an associate attempted to throw a drug-filled football over the prison wall. Morgan had pleaded guilty in 2021 to federal drug conspiracy charges and was ordered to serve nearly 22 years in federal custody. But instead of being transferred to federal prison, he was returned to Salinas Valley, the same facility from which he had run the entire operation. He was still there on October 23, 2025. At 9:52 a.m., Ray Waldron, Robert Englund, and a third inmate named Todd Givens entered the recreation yard and moved toward Morgan. 3 improvised weapons, 1 target. Staff issued verbal commands to stop. By the time responding personnel reached the yard, the attack had already ended. At 10:04 a.m., Todd Morgan was pronounced dead. 12 minutes. 3 inmate-made weapons were recovered at the scene. Waldron, Englund, and Givens were moved to restrictive housing. An investigation was opened by the Salinas Valley Investigative Services Unit and the Monterey County District Attorney's Office. In the world of Salinas Valley State Prison, this was not unprecedented. It was not even surprising. It was consequence, carried out in broad daylight, in front of cameras and guards, by men who had already proven, long before they arrived here, that they were willing to kill. 2 men, 2 motorcycle clubs, 2 different decades of violence, 1 Tuesday morning, and yet, as disturbing as their stories are, the final man on this list unsettles people in a different way. Not because of organized gang politics or motorcycle club rivalries, but because of something much simpler and much harder to protect yourself from. The last man you'd expect. Everything we have told you so far has followed a recognizable pattern. The gang leader who rose to power through murder, an enforcer who ran violence like a business operation. 2 men forged inside outlaw motorcycle clubs whose histories of killing stretched back decades. These are the kinds of men people imagine when they think about the most dangerous inmates in a maximum security prison. Men with long histories, documented reputations, names that law enforcement knew well before they ever arrived at Salinas Valley. The last man on this list is different. His name is Brian Ramirez, and his story does not begin with a decade-long killing spree. It does not begin with a leadership position inside one of America's most feared criminal organizations. It does not begin with a name that anyone outside of Los Angeles County would have recognized. It begins the way so many stories inside these walls begin, young, angry, and already lost before most people have figured out who they are. Brian Ramirez was born in Los Angeles County. In March of 2014, at just 18 years old, he arrived at Salinas Valley State Prison. The charges that brought him there were serious: carjacking, second-degree robbery, vehicle theft, each charge carrying an enhancement for the use of a firearm, and for committing a violent felony in association with a street gang. He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. 18 years old, a life sentence, and ahead of him, an indefinite amount of time inside one of California's most violent maximum security facilities. He was not a general. He was not a commander. He was not a name that law enforcement briefings circulated across multiple counties. He was a young man from Los Angeles, serving life, assigned to a cell, assigned to a yard, assigned to a life he would now have to navigate inside these walls. And for years, That is exactly what he did. Until February 13th, 2026. That morning began like any other morning at Salinas Valley State Prison. Cells unlocked, routines resumed, staff moved through their shifts. At approximately 9:40 a.m., prison staff approached a cell in one of the housing units. Inside, they found Dan Felix, Brian Ramirez's cellmate, unresponsive on the floor. Staff immediately initiated life-saving measures. They activated 911. Outside medical personnel responded. At 10:01 a.m., Dan Felix was pronounced dead. He was 47 years old. Felix had been at Salinas Valley since 2004, serving a life sentence as a third striker for attempted first-degree murder, with enhancements for prior serious felony convictions and intentional discharge of a firearm. He had been inside this facility for over 20 years, and he died inside a cell, with one other person present. Brian Ramirez was placed in restrictive housing immediately. The Salinas Valley Investigative Services Unit opened an investigation. The Monterey County District Attorney's Office was notified. The Office of the Inspector General was informed. The investigation was classified as a homicide. There was no recreation yard. No improvised weapons recovered in open view of cameras and guards. No gang order passed down through a chain of command. No motorcycle club rivalry playing out in front of witnesses. Just a cell. 2 men, and one of them did not survive the night. What happened inside that cell, the exact sequence of events, the words spoken or not spoken, the moments leading up to what the state of California is now investigating as a murder. None of that has been fully established in public record about the time of this video. What is established is this: Brian Ramirez was the only other person in that cell. Dan Felix is dead. And Salinas Valley State Prison was now opening its 7th homicide investigation in less than 1 year. There is something about Brian Ramirez's case that is harder to process than the others on this list. And it is not because his alleged crime is more graphic or more organized. It is actually because of the opposite. Timothy McGhee operated on the streets of Los Angeles with a crew behind him. Johnny Magdaleno had a gang hierarchy authorizing his every move. Ray Waldron and Robert England acted together in daylight with 2 other men beside them. Brian Ramirez, if the investigation confirms what authorities suspect, allegedly killed a man who was sleeping in the same room. No audience, no backup, no chain of command. Contained violence of 2 people locked in a space the size of a parking spot, with nowhere to go and no one watching. That is not a story about gang warfare or motorcycle club politics. That is a story about what happens when dangerous men are placed in close proximity, with no exit, inside a system that is running out of space and running out of answers. And it is the story that Salinas Valley State Prison keeps writing, year after year, cell after cell, body after body. 7 homicide investigations, 1 year, 1 prison. The last case on this list did not involve the most famous name. It did not involve the most documented criminal history, but it may be the one that stays with you the longest. Because unlike the others, it could have happened to anyone unfortunate enough to be assigned to that cell.